Good evening, this is VK3SL. We're testing on 160 metres and 2 metres in the FM mode. We do this every week, and this is no exception. This is the big horseshoe magnet that draws me into the booth and draws out all of this archaic material for test purposes. And what we do is just work with different forms of modulated sound so that people can test their receivers and I can test the gear here. It's all sort of a mad conspiracy, really. Anyhow, we'll kick off, as per usual, with something from the 20s. We always go back to that decade. It's sort of a decade that prevails in this place. And so what have we got? I think we have on the turntable, with the magnetic pickup, we have Mr... who is it? It's Mr. Rudy Valley. Mr. Rudy Valley and his Connecticut Yankees. And this is one of these records that's really wrecked, and it sounds so much better with the magnetic pickup. So here we go. We drop the stylus and we'll see what happens. VK3SL testing.
A pity she wasn't pretty. She's not so hard to see. She weighs 243. I hope she doesn't get much fatter, but if she does, that doesn't matter. Kitty from Kansas City. Now there's a girl that I adore. She's so dumb, she doesn't know a thing. Why, she thinks that July the 4th is an English king. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Well, she's so dumb, her brain is in a whirl. Why, she thinks that Babe Ruth is a chorus girl. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Well, she's so dumb, she really is a dear. Why, she thinks that Ailey is a college cheer. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Her name was Kitty from Kansas City. Sure was a pity she wasn't pretty. Hey, I love her just because she's not the girl she was. She can cook and she can wash, but when she makes her love, oh gosh, it's Kitty from Kansas City. Now there's a girl that I adore. She's so dumb, sometimes I almost cry. Why, she thinks that sing is a lullaby. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Well, she's so dumb, it really is a shame. Why, she thinks that Muscle Shoals is a boxer's name. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Well, she's so dumb, sometimes it almost kills. Why, she thought Rudy Valley was a place between two hills. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me. Well, she's so dumb, she gives me an awful cramp. Why, she thinks that an Israelite is an electric lamp. I love her, that's easy to see. It's Kansas City Kitty for me.
Well, that's Mr. Big Ego, Rudy Valley with Kansas City Kitty, another very politically incorrect record. And he has to bring his own name into the song, of course. Lots of stories about Mr. Valley, and he wasn't the greatest of artists, and he seemed to sort of found himself into the elite crooning class. Not quite sure how he did it, but maybe he just knew people in the right place. But he made lots of records, and he was a big hit in the 20s. It's very smooth. What's on the other side? If I Had a Girl Like You. Well, we'll have a listen to this one as well, because I'm sort of getting organised here. Haven't quite got my mind into gear. I think I'm not overdriving on 2. I'm testing, but sounds okay, but maybe not. I'll have another listen in a minute. And we've got all the fans whirling away here, putting out a little bit more power tonight. Just pushing things that little bit much more, but we'll see if it's making any difference. And what else? What other developments? We have been working with the magnetic pickup all week. I put up at least 12, 13 YouTubes in the last couple of days testing classical material with the magnetic pickup. And it's been a really interesting little journey. And it's a natural form of noise reduction. And there's a lot of presence. It's compelling listening, I have to say. It's been surprising. So interesting one there. But we'll persevere and see what our best parameters are, I suppose. One thing I'm sort of quite happy about now is not having to change the needle every record. I've resigned myself to that fact, so I can get at least a few sides before there's any audible damage. And since these records are mostly worn out anyhow, and they'll probably all end up in a skip, we'll just play them. All right, let's have another listen. We'll hear the other side of the record we just heard on a HMV from 1927, VK3SL.
Lonesome and blue, but when I look at you, there's one thing I know is true. I wouldn't be lonesome, I wouldn't be blue, if I had a girl like you. I've waited a lifetime, I hated the nighttime, those dark nights have made me blue. I wouldn't be waiting, I wouldn't be hating, if I had a girl like you. I don't know why I'm feeling the way I do. I hope that I find someone who really can be true. Everything seems like one of my dreams. Wake me up and say it's true. I wouldn't be dreaming, I wouldn't be scheming, if I had a girl like you.
Well, it's not really up to our usual standards. That was Rudy Valley and his Connecticut Yankees from about 1928, the B-side of Kansas City Kitty. And that's a very worn HMV from that time. What else? Here's another one Savoy Orpheans, The Blue Room. I don't think I've played that before. I think I can use the same needle. We'll have a listen to this. And if you're listening on the streaming service, there was a Romanian program on before the main switchover. And that's because there's where the MP3 player with all of the past programs, our rotating archive, is out of service. I've actually had 2 MP3 players die this week, so I need to resolve that. I'll need to find a server and do something more creative and more substantial, I suppose. So that's on the cards. It's been earmarked for the R&D exploits in the next little while, so we'll get on to that. But there will be dead air for much of the week. But I'll try and put on some exotic program in the half hour before we switch over to these missions, if I'm not ready by next week. So that's just a little anecdote. Okay, we'll hear the Savoy Orpheans, The Blue Room, from about 1927 as well. And we'll just place the stylus and up we go. VK3SL. Right, that was a very worn-out recording of The Blue Room, and with the Savoy Orpheans. I don't know who was singing on that. Does it say? It says vocal refrain recorded the resident band at the Savoy Hotel in London. And good to hear a bit of English music. Now, what else have we got in the pile of ruined records from Vault number 2? We're sort of still digging through this pile of reject records. And I've got one here with the label scratched off here, so that's sort of good. Oh, yeah, I can see the other side. This has had lots of steel needles tear through this one. The surface has all gone grey and there's digs everywhere. But if I hold it up to the light, I can see it says, "Keeping out of mischief now, Fats Waller and his rhythm." So this would go back to the mid-1930s, I presume. So we'll have a listen, see how it presents. This is VK3SL. We're testing here on 160 metres, 2 metres, streaming online and all of that jazz. And you know where to find me. Just look at the QRZ page. Here we go. Fats Waller and his rhythm. Okay, you're listening to Distortion Radio, VK3SL. We're testing all recordings on 160 metres and 2 metres. This is a Friday night regular thing. Listening to these crumbed out old 78s and whimsical meanderings and a little bit of live music here and there, but all for the sake of working on modulation, understanding the character of modulated sound. That's what we're testing. Nothing else intended, so please don't get any ideas about being entertained. It's certainly not at all permissible. Now, what have I got in my hand? Benny Goodman's Quartet, Opus 1/2, says. Swing Music Series. Well, this is another one from the trashed record pile, so I might put a new stylus in. That was getting very hard to hear, that last record. We'll just lift up the arm, find the little hole. There we go, we're getting used to this now. Can't quite do it by feel yet. But there we have it. Stylus well in place. And That's quite... Oh, I might put it in a bit further. There we go. So, Benny Goodman taking us on a jazz swing journey. VK3SL testing. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot better on the magnetic pickup than it does on anything else. That record is in bad nick. It all comes from the second vault. We've been mining that archive, and I didn't even know what was there. Just pancakes of coverless records, which I'd sort of put away because they were either unplayable or just in such poor condition. So they sort of play really reasonably well with this heavy magnetic pickup and steel needles. Last week we played a recording of Kilarov's Russian Balalaika Orchestra, and we'll hear the other side of that now. So let's have a listen to Song of the Volga Boatman. So Krylov's Russian Balalaika Orchestra EA48, which dates it almost certainly to late 1925. I think the EA series started in August of that year, if I'm right, Chris. I think I am. Let's have a listen. VK3SL. Well, I don't know if that was a natural decrescendo or it was someone sitting at the fader. What was going on? Same thing happened at the start. It built up to an almighty crescendo and suddenly was flattening the VU meter, and then everything was going crazy. I could even see on the SDR that we had a very robust-looking pattern. Never mind. It was the Russian Balalaikas Orchestra's fault. They're too concerned with their dynamics. Okay, well, that was a little bit of something mildly exotic. Well, in that vogue, we'll continue. This next one is The Forge in the Forest. Walter B. Rogers and his band. Concert band, it says. And this is on the Brunswick, and it looks very suspiciously like it'll be a light ray record. So that's good. Well, this is distortion upon distortion here. So this is distortion radio, so you'll hear all of the intermod and all of the horrible artifacts, so people will be scrambling for their tone controls to try and find their ideal settings. So it says The Forge in the Forest. So I presume, I haven't even listened to this, I presume it's something sort of vaguely programmatic. I think we played something a little bit similar a few weeks ago. Let's have a listen to this. VK3SL, we're testing here, and this is music from Vault B. Well, there we have it. That's some post-Edwardian kitsch. Concert music with special effects. Wouldn't it be fun to be in the percussion department making all those special effects with whistles and wood noises and animal noises? And I suppose it's the sort of thing they had in silent cinemas. So that's just a bit of a novelty. But yeah, something of obscure and massively distorted. Walter B. Rogers and his band. And shall I play the other side? No, I'll save that for another time. Well, look, just firstly want to acknowledge Frank's email. Thank you. I just received that, and all acknowledged, all fine, noting that having a few equipment problems and may not be able to come up at the end. That's all fine. I completely understand. It's the run-of-the-mill here, equipment problems. I'm always struggling with something going astray. But wish you well with that, Frank. Good luck with it. Hope you can resolve whatever the issue is. And we'll look forward to having a chat when you're back on board. All right, I'm just popping another needle in. Yes, I still can't quite get my handle on this. It's a bit slow. I'm putting it in because I want this record I'm a bit precious about. Well, as a part of this recent archive dig, what do they call it? Archaeological dig, 78s, found a big stack of records from Japan from the 1930s. And I think the last time I'd seen them must have been in 1981, because one of those triangular no dam stickers from the campaign in the early 80s fell out of the pile. So that would be the last time I looked through them. So, and I would have only been a teenager then. But I'm very pleased because I have no idea what's on them. And I had a little bit of a sample. And I'm very happy to say I have my own copy. Wait for it, folks. I have my own copy of Butterfly of Nagasaki, VK3SL. Butterfly of Nagasaki, and I have no idea who was singing. Oh, I should know because it's up on YT, isn't it? But I haven't got that source in front of me. It's all in Japanese. And I even got our Japanese correspondent to translate the label, and we had that verified, but we didn't write down the name of the artist. I might put the other side on. Why not? I'll just turn it over and have a listen. What's on the other side? I have no idea, but I think it'll be pretty good and very, very atmospheric. It certainly conjures up a great image of Japan at that time. All right, we'll give this a go and see what happens. VK3SL testing.
南の国歌の国太鼓を打て拍子を取れ楽しき今宵南の星十字星愛しの瞳に似て輝ける愛の光今宵もあの空に高く響け思い出の懐かしのボレロよ思いを込め高らかに太鼓を打て拍子を取れ楽しき今宵南の花貝原優しき人の胸に愛の印高く香る情けを風に乗せ遠く送る思い出の懐かしのボレロよ
Right, there we go. Absolutely no idea what that is, but it sounds very much in that idiom, doesn't it? And yeah, it's good. It's great I found these records. They're going to be fun. There's a whole stack of them, and they're all different labels, and they're all striking Japanese designs on them. Some of them are on the Nitto label, and most of them are Columbia's, and probably I'd say nearly all of them are from the 1930s. So there's about 20. So we'll go through them systematically and see what they reveal. So that's all good. Now, yeah, I've been sort of stuffing around with the transmitter. It's winding right back on power, and it's one of those tail chasing situations. I can modify the SWR. I can get that right back with the tuner, and then it slowly creeps up again. So it's constantly going to do this, I think. So we'll just have to live with low power, and hopefully everyone can hear all right. And then we'll just look into the situation or look at alternatives at a later time. It's just the way of things tonight, unfortunately. Yeah, it's been really good other weeks. I don't know why it's happened all of a sudden. It was very robust and, looking like it was working well at the beginning. But the thing's not even hot, it's not even warm. So even the power supply hasn't warmed up particularly, so I don't think it's thermal. Maybe it's something else. So just one of those things. All right, what am I going to play next? Before the program started, I played some Romanian music. And off LP. So I reckon I can play a bit more. So let's have a look and see. What's going? I'm just looking at things here. Yeah, all right. Well, we can do this. I might switch the mono button off, although I don't think there's anyone listening in stereo now. But we can try. Anyhow, this is a part of the recent dig. I found some ethnic music, as a shelf of ethnic music on LPs, on unusual labels. And this is on a Romanian label. And I can't read any of it. So, an Arion label. Anyhow, it seems to feature some music of George Zamfir, who sort of made it really big in the West later on, but I reckon this is early days. I think this is before he sort of became an icon. Anyhow, he's playing the pan flute, others are playing as well. It's a little bit more generic, although it's all frenetic, but certainly got that gypsy flavour. So why not have a listen to some of this music? I'll just play it straight off the LP and we'll see how it goes. VK3SL. Right, I'll fade it there, I think. I could keep going. It's very evocative. Makes me think of those high mountain tops in the Kapati range. Spent a lot of time up there. And it was, this music certainly paints that picture. There's also a couple of albums of Hungarian Chartist music, gypsy music on Eastern European labels. So we'll have to exploit that as well. And it's good to look at some of the exotic offerings, and I think it sort of adds dimension to the program to do that. Well, still having a few transmitter problems, so I can't really get the power up too high. Never mind. That's the way things go. So I won't sort of get distracted by that anymore, I think. You can get a bit obsessed chasing my SWR. It sort of can be a little bit of a point of negative focus. All right, so what we'll do now, let me see. It's very hard to follow on from something like this because it sort of paints a picture of another world. But I have got other things in store, so we'll probably need to just go for the proverbial gear change. I actually put a piano roll on. Maybe that's a stopgap, something live. Now, I found a piano roll called Mocking the Classics. So it's, it'll probably sound even more mocking because the pedals on the bellows are not working terribly well, and there's a lot of there's a bit of lag, to say the least, but I can sort of mechanically move things along to some degree. So we'll get a very sort of quirky, uneven, lots of wow in our piano playing potentially. All right, well, I'll have a listen to this Mocking the Classics. I better get the right microphone on. I think it's that microphone, and I can switch it on now. Well, that sounds like it's... Oh, no, it's not that one. It must be this one. Hello. I'll go and test it. Just testing. Oh, yes. There we go. I got that right up. I hope it's not too loud. All right, we'll see how we go. I've got to move over to the other side of the room, so we'll just have to have some dead air. What's happening on there? Oh, this has improved. It's gone back up. Well, there we go. That's not so bad. Okay, well, bear with me. I'll be back in a momento. VK3SL. Here we go, climbing over all the equipment here. Now, let's see. Am I working? Hello. Good. It's looking good. We might just switch the mono button in. I'll extend the mic out to give me a little bit more manoeuvring room. And I'll climb over the chair and we'll pedal away. It's my workout for the day. Had a very sedentary day, so I need to do some workout, and we'll up the speed a bit so we can get a bit more inertia. Here we go. Whoa. go, I'll just have to get out of here. It's a bit of a scramble around all these mitters and junk. There we go. Yes, it is harder than riding a bike. And, well, it actually made a mock of me because it seemed to work quite well tonight. So that's the pianola playing Mocking the Classics. And I think it's I think that recording must go back, that roll must go way back to the Edwardian era. It looks like the scroll of Isaiah. It's got wooden ends on the piano roll, and it looks very biblical. Anyhow, there we have it. That was a bit of Edwardian kitsch. We'll just move over to the other microphone. Back to the squeaky chair. This is VK3SL. We're testing here on 160 metres and 2 metres. How's the... Oh, look at this. The things have settled down. It's looking a lot better. We have full power again. Oh, that's good. So that was just an intermittent thing. Okay, I don't know what we're going to do next. Oh, yes. We have something of jazz interest, or OTR interest, really. And I'm just going to have to cue it up and sort things. I'll have to move the microphone over here a little bit. And so now I was talking to... No, I wasn't talking to... I had an email from Mr. Fleming asking about some Frank Cogler. Now, I had to search wide and far, but we managed to find something of interest. So we'll see how we go with this. I'll just have to switch this on to our... Yep, usually this is the channel I use the SDR on, but we're right and set to go. So let's sit down and have a listen to just a little snapshot of Trocadero nostalgia. VK3SL testing.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For the next hour, you'll be entertained by the Trocadero, Australia's greatest entertainment unit. Directed by J.C. Bendrod. Not only has Mr. Bendrod created for your entertainment the Trocadero, in addition, he gives you the Trocadero Orchestra. It's new, it's big, glamorous, and it swings. Leading this amazing combination of brilliant Australian talent is one who is to be the greatest of all Australia's dance band maestros. Frank Coughlin. A personality, new, an invigorating personality, and as such he is known to the greatest dance rendezvous of the world. In London, at the famous Savoy Hotel, at the ultra-exclusive Claridge's, with Jack Hilton, Ray Noble, at the London Palladium, and over the BBC. Frank lives, breathes, and plays swing. He is one of the finest instrumentalists living. He plays trombone, trumpet, saxophone, piano. He sings, composes, and arranges. Of his compositions you will hear much. Of Frank himself you will see plenty at those delightful afternoon tea sessions every day at 3, and of course every evening at the Trocadero for dancing. But stop. Listen. Was you inspired my soul when all first came to stay? To every heart a feeling, my love refrain, come stealing, my song will live, though all things may pass away.
Better be ready round 8:30. Now bass dance, don't be late. Once you get there, when the band starts playing, dance off both my shoes. When I hear those Jelly Roll blues, tomorrow night after dark town skirters fall.
Right, there we go. That's all there is. That's just a selection from the Trocadero, found from a secondary source, and it's not exactly the material I was hoping to find with Barbara. What's her name? Can't remember her name. Yeah, there's a lot of Frank Colgan material around, and I thought I had some here, and I searched high and low, and I couldn't find it. But it probably will turn up when I least expect. But that's a small offering, and you heard him do a trombone solo there. And I've got a whole stack of sort of trad jazz with Frank Colgan, but it's not quite so appealing as the big band era and the early stuff. So, and I think the stuff you're referring to, John, was some of his dance band arrangements. So, if we can get hold of them, that would be good. Yeah, it's nice to have some Australian material, and that old transcription is quite interesting little snapshot. There's actually more of it too, but we just thought we'd have a little example. All right, we'll sort of move classical bound, I think. Now, I was sifting through things, and I found. I have to switch these off multitasking here. Not very good at multitasking. I have to sort of, stop and think. Now, we've got a series of 45s of solo instruments of the orchestra, and there's one of Leon Goossens. Now, he is an oboe player who I really admire. There's a recording of Leon Goossens playing the oboe solo in the Brahms concerto, violin concerto. In the second movement, there's a huge solo, beautiful solo, oboe solo, and Fritz Kreiser is playing the violin. And the story is that the Kreiser forgot to come in with his entry because the solo was so beautiful. Well, I can well understand, and I've always admired anything that has Mr. Goossens in it. And so I was really pleased when I saw this. This is accompanied by Gerald Moore. It's in Goossens' later years. Now he's playing a little nocturne by Field, arranged by Evelyn Rothwell, but it's quite beautiful, but it's very scratchy. So I'm going to just quickly check in with the noise. I've got a play-through noise reduction system here. So the SP10, I can just plug that in. It should be really seamless. It should work well. I've used it a lot before. So that's all up and running. So we'll put this 45 on and see if it meets expectations. But I think Mr. Goossens is a musician who needs to be acknowledged. So we will do that now. VK3SL, we're testing here and listening to the music of Leon. That's not very good cueing, is it? Left-hand cueing behind me. There we go, that's better. VK3SL testing. Okay, that was the music of Field, John Field, I think it is, and the playing of Leon Goossens, playing the oboe with Gerald Moore on the piano. It's from a 45 extended play, solo instruments of the orchestra series, from probably released in the late 50s. So interesting to hear. Now, I did mention before the recording with Fritz Kreisler in 1936, the Brahms concerto with the glorious oboe solo. And I have found it. It's here online. So we'll have a listen. I think that's a good thing to follow on with, since we're doing it riffing on a bit of a Goossens theme. This is some of the most beautiful playing ever recorded, both on violin and on oboe. It is absolutely glorious. Now, I think he's only got I don't know if he's got the full movement here. We'll see what happens. But we'll certainly get the opening section, which is so beautiful. This is VK3SL testing, and we're listening for the music of John Barbaroli conducting the London Philharmonic Orchestra with Fritz Kreisler and Leon Goossens. Wow, that's one of the greatest piece of music of all time. It's the Brahms Violin Concerto, the middle movement of the concerto, and it's a really important recording because Fritz Kreisler was one of only two fiddle players who recorded the work who actually played it to Brahms. He heard Kreisler as a child play as a very young man play the concerto, and no doubt coached him to some degree. And you can hear Kreisler with all his gorgeous Viennese witticisms, wouldn't say witticisms, but there's that Viennese sort of lilt that prevails in everything he plays, and he uses it such charming effect in the concerto. And of course, that dialogue with the oboe and the violin at the start is something to behold. It's so great. Kreisler recorded it earlier in 1926 as well. There's another recording where he's a little bit more on top of his technique. By 1936, the recording we just heard, he was sort of getting on a bit, but still in very good form. It's wonderful. So very special. Now that's off YouTube, and I have the originals here. They're on the shelf, and I probably should have, if I'd had everything catalogued, I would have been able to access it quickly, but it is here. And I could have played it with the new pickup. Never the mind. We'll have to revisit this theme, I think. Hear the other movements of the Brahms concerto. But yeah, that was Fritz Kreisler. I always like hearing Kreisler's playing. Now I'm at a juncture point. I don't know whether to go down one route or another. I've got half an hour or so, and I have a whole lot of stuff about Mr. Busch. That's Adolf Busch, the violin player, the founder of the Busch Chamber Players and the leader of the Busch String Quartet. Last week we played some Busch, and I was so impressed. I played a sample that was sent to me. Actually, while we're on air, there's a sample sent to me, and I had a quick listen to it and then played it last week. It's on last week's Missions, and I was so captivated. It's an off-air, it's a live recording of the Busch Quartet just the year that Adolf Busch died, and he died quite young. He was only 60. And he died unexpectedly, and the quartet folded at that point. They've been going for 40 years. And it's such a great recording, and I went and bought it. It's the first first recording I've bought in years. I don't usually buy CDs. I'm too stingy. But in this case I did, because it's nowhere else in the public domain, or not yet. So I took the plunge, and I've listened to it non-stop all week, and it is so wonderful. It's marvellous playing. But I think I might save it. I might save it up until next week, and we'll make a bit more of a feature of Adolf Busch. There's so much material. One of the recordings I put up on test missions this week on the with the new magnetic pickup is a recording of the Busch Chamber Players playing the first movement of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 5, so I can refer people to that if they want to have a listen. Fortunately, it's only a fragment of the first movement. It's not all there. The other bit's lost. So, it's lost in my collection. It's probably on the shelf somewhere, but it's been misfiled. But anyhow, there's a sample of it, but that was a test to put up, and I've listened to that a couple of times, and it sounds good. All right, so the other theme, which I probably will now take up, is the music of Barbara Hannigan. Now, we also heard some of her scene. In fact, I can just give you a bit of I'll bring the microphone over a little bit, and I can get up and cozy to the desk, which means I can be more local to things. Now, Barbara Hannigan is this extraordinary contemporary soprano who is just extraordinary. She can really do the impossible. And we heard her sing an example of Mysteries of the Macabre. That's when she's acting as the director of secret police in sort of S&M costume with the London Symphony Orchestra. It's quite bizarre, but this is Ligeti's opera, The Mysteries of the Macabre. And yes, it's quite hilarious, but exceptionally virtuosic. I'll give you a sample. And for that, she got I think it's a 15-minute ovation. And it's just the last bit of it, but it's the most incredibly visceral performance, and it's so hyper virtuosic. She's probably the only person in the world who can sing it, and she acts and sings, and so it's an aria from the Mysteries of the Macabre by Ligeti. And we heard the whole thing. Well, we heard that whole aria last couple of weeks ago, and there's so many versions of it on YouTube, and they're really all compelling to watch with different orchestras. But this one we just heard with the London Symphony with Simon Rattle. So it's it's probably one of the best orchestras in the world. She's in that class of performer. Anyhow, I've been sort of following her career a bit because I'm intrigued by someone with those skills, and a lot of interviews with her. But there's one that sort of really stuck out, and I'd like to play it because it's about Berg's opera Lulu. It's an opera. It's always intrigued me. The music of Alban Berg. He's one of the first of the dodecaphonic composers, or serial, or 12-tone composers. He's of the second Viennese school, and he was composing around the same time as Schoenberg. So it was sort of, he was moving he was moving with a new tide, I suppose you could say, towards atonal music and breaking away from traditional forms. Now, at a very crucial time, that sort of post-expressionist era, so around the First World War, and before he was Berg was born around about 1890, I think. Anyhow, he wrote a couple of operas. One was Wozzeck, which was just incredibly successful in the late 1920s. Then he started writing Lulu, which was going to be his magnum opus, and he took him better part of about 5 years, and he wrote most of it, and he had a break in the middle and wrote his violin concerto. And sadly, he got a mosquito bite and died. He got an abscess on his back from an insect bite. I think it was a mosquito. And so poor Mr. Berg passed away, leaving his great work, Lulu, unfinished. Now, it was finished in more recent times, and it's become sort of a staple of the contemporary opera repertoire. But it has the most demanding soprano parts probably in the entire repertoire. And Barbara Hannigan took that project on board, and it's just exhausting. It's incredible to even conceive someone undertaking such a task. It's been performed only by a few people, and so yes, she has a talk about Lulu. She talks about the character. Lulu character. It's based on a play. It's all about the feminine fatale. It's sort of the way it's mostly interpreted is based on sort of misogynist concepts. And she has her own unique vision of the thing, and she talks about how she learned the role, now she synthesized the role, and sort of reveals a lot about an artist of that caliber and how they really address their craft. And it's a very honest and really interesting portrayal of how music is absorbed by perhaps one of the greatest living singers. So I thought it would be, this goes about 10 minutes, and then the aria she's referring to goes for about 5 minutes, so I'll put that on at the end. So look, let's have a listen to Barbara Hannigan in interview. Well, she's giving a talk, and then we'll have a little excerpt from Alban Berg's Lulu.
Lulu is an opera written in the 1930s by the composer Alban Berg. It's about an extraordinary woman who is, in my opinion, the architect of her own destiny, even, in my opinion, of her own death. For those of you familiar with the opera, or Wedekin's play upon which it is based, you may have the image of a femme fatale. You may have the assumption of a misogynist story that presents us with a woman used, abused, portrayed as a manipulator, a man-eater, a sex fiend, finally degraded and savagely murdered. I disagree. She is one of the most honest people I have ever met, on or off stage. I love her because she is true to herself. She forces others to see her for who she is. She survives. She is angry, risky, triumphant. She fails and loves wholeheartedly. She lives every moment with a complete and committed presence. She is everything I could hope to be. The trajectory was this. I was hired 3 or 4 years in advance, as is normal in opera world, to sing Lulu at La Monnaie, the opera company in Brussels, with the opening night last October 2012. It is a marathon of a role, 3.5 hours of music, and Lulu is on stage almost the entire time, singing her life. The idea of taking on this role was absolutely daunting. It seemed impossible to me. It is one of the most demanding roles in the entire operatic repertoire. Let me say up front, I have a problem with my own aging, not with anyone else's. Turning 40 was very difficult. I have probably another 10 to 15 years left because as a singer, I have a best before date. I have a shelf life. I will eventually lose my bloom, my elasticity, my virtuosity. It makes me angry. I feel driven and I feel desperate. But my dedication to art, and it has been a full-on, intense, and passionate relationship, the best and longest relationship of my life, pays off in a way that I never could imagine. There is no way that 5 or even 2 years ago I could have tackled such a role. So for that I am thankful. To sing a role like Lulu is not just a matter of voice and musical preparation, it's a matter of life experience and time. First step, sign the contract, say yes. Fear and apprehension. Next, purchase the score. It's actually 2 scores, this thick. One for Acts 1 and 2 and another for Act 3. They are heavy. I had to buy a knapsack because I couldn't carry them in my purse. And I got a very good massage therapist. After a year of avoiding it, I opened the scores. I started carrying them around with me everywhere I went. But I could barely bring myself to open them. They would sit on the desk at whatever hotel I was in whatever country, and I would just look at them. They loomed. It's funny because I often have reviews that call me fearless or extraterrestrial, and that always shocks me. I am terribly human and I am filled with fear, but I am rarely debilitated by it. I continue to move forward somehow despite my trepidation. Of course, like anyone, I hear these little voices over here, then they say sometimes that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not strong enough, or that I won't make it, or that I don't have the stamina. And I hear them, and they scare me, but I don't engage in a dialogue with them. I just keep breathing and singing. The process of learning an opera role can be different for every piece. In the case of Lulu, I began very meticulously just with note and rhythm. I didn't think much about the text. I didn't think much about interpretation. I just wanted to learn the lay of the land. I won't get analytical about the music, but let me say that it comes from the end of the Romantic era and at the beginning of the new world of harmony, 1930s. If I had to give colors and temperatures, I would say icy, hot, red, black, platinum, and never, never, never gray. What does it feel like to sing Lulu? It feels like my whole body is shaking with resonance. It feels like I become the sound of humanity. It is exhilarating and it's extremely satisfying in a physical way. In late spring of last year, I closed my Lulu scores and I committed myself to another opera for a few months, written on skin, which premiered last summer in Aix-en-Provence and which opened 2 nights ago at the Royal Opera House here in London. The brilliant Katie Mitchell directed this incredible opera by George Benjamin and Martin Krimp. I sing the central role of Agnès. It was written for me. All our roles were written for those of us singing at the Opera House. It's about a 13th century woman who liberates herself from an oppressive marriage by way of an illicit love affair. I spend most of my life singing text and music written by men. I am a muse to many composers, most of them male. They work out their demons on me, or so we hope. Alban Berg certainly did so with Lulu. I feel like when I am singing those female characters, I am not just that character, I am also the composer. I am their voice. It's very interesting for me that I I chose a career, one of the few careers, in which I have absolutely no male competition. I'm a soprano. And now, by the way, I am expanding into the field of conducting, which is almost completely dominated by men. It's a strange combination. Fortunately, in making music, as far as I'm concerned, I can be both male and female. There's no gender to sound. When Written on Skin finished in July, I removed myself to Nova Scotia, my home province in eastern Canada, to a cottage on the ocean with seals on the bank, chorus of seals. I don't know if you've ever heard them sing, but it's extraordinary. And for my summer vacation, I worked about 8 hours a day trying to memorize the opera, because in opera, you have to show up at the first rehearsal with the piece completely memorized. So I traipsed around the lawn or on the beach below, walking and jumping and singing and dancing Lulu, until she became incorporated in me. And then I returned to Europe to begin rehearsals. The monumental task of memorizing the role gave me strength. I still was fearful. I still wasn't sure I would make it. But it did give me a little bit of extra power and something that I could bring to Lulu. I arrived for the first day in Brussels for rehearsal, and I was taken to a ballet shop to be fitted for my point shoes, as if it wasn't already going to be hard enough to sing the piece. I was told that I would play it on point, at least the first 1.5 hours. Because the director had the idea that Lulu, who is a dancer in the opera, was a ballet dancer and had dreams of being a ballet dancer. So I'm 41 and I was going on point for the first time. It hurt like hell and I loved it. I couldn't wait to lace up every morning. And after performances, sometimes we even had a doctor in my dressing room to administer the next prescription for my infected feet. It was fantastic. I could hardly walk. Before I was going on stage for the opening night, I had a blank piece of paper taped onto the mirror of my dressing room. I would stare at it to clear my mind. I didn't want any preconceptions. Every night I wanted it to be clean. And as I walked down the stairs, hobbled, wearing my point shoes, to begin the first act, I felt very deeply, yes. All the opera roles I sing have a very heavy effect on my life. And in the past year, I have sung 3 characters, all of whom commit suicide rather than stay oppressed. In our production of Lulu, at the end of the piece, she forced into prostitution. It's her first day, and she knows she won't be able to bear it. And the third customer she picks up is Jack the Ripper. And in our staging, it was a conscious choice. And at the end, instead of him murdering her, she takes his hand, and smiling, she drives his knife into her body. In my own meager attempts at self-analysis, I would say that I experienced 2 psychological syndromes in the process of preparing and performing Lulu: Stockholm Syndrome and survivor guilt. As you know, Stockholm Syndrome is when a captive begins to identify in a positive way with her captor. In my case, I felt like Lulu took me hostage from the moment I signed the contract in 2008. She invaded me, and she took over my mind and my heart and my soul, and I eventually fell in love with her. She laid beside me in bed at night. She woke me up. She was in my dreams, and she became the spring in my step. She became my reason for moving, for looking after myself, and I ended up wanting to defend her to the ends of the earth. Survival guilt was the more painful of the 2. Lulu died, and I lived. I had to go on after closing night, and it took me months after the final performance to recover. She was gone, and I had to sing other music. I tried to make her part of everything I sang. I felt like I was being unfaithful. Nothing compared to her. Nothing even came close. And I would burst into tears whenever anyone would mention her name. I felt both invincible and useless. Eventually, those feelings faded, but I miss them, and I miss her. I want to read you, finally, the text of Lulu's lead, her main pivotal aria in the piece. She sings it at the moment that her third husband, Dr. Schön, the man she professes as the only man she has ever truly loved, the man who began an affair with her when he was in his 30s and she was barely a teenager, hands her a gun and demands that she kill herself. She doesn't. She sings this aria, and then when he tries to force her to her knees and pray before her imminent death, she shoots him 5 times. I will read it first in English, and then I will read it in German, because even if you don't speak German, you will feel the strength and architecture of the language. She says, "If men have killed themselves for my sake, that does not lower my value. You know just as well as me why you made me your wife, as I know why I took you for my husband. You deceived your best friend for me, and yet you cannot go on deceiving yourself. If you hold me as a sacrifice for your last days, remember that you are the one who took away my entire youth. I have never in the world wished to seem to be anything other than what I am taken for, and I have never in the world been taken for anything other than what I am. Wenn sich die Menschen meinetwillen umgebracht haben, so setzt das meinen Wert nicht herab. Du hast so gut gewusst, weswegen du mich zur Frau nahmst, wie ich gewusst habe, weswegen ich dich zum Mann nahm. Du hattest deine besten Freunde mit mir betrogen. Du konntest nicht gut auch noch dich selber mit mir betrügen. Wenn du mir deinen Lebensabend zum Opfer bringst, so hast du meine ganze Jugend dafür gehabt. Ich habe nie in der Welt für etwas anderes scheinen wollen, als wofür man mich genommen hat. Und man hat mich nie in der Welt für etwas anderes genommen, als was ich bin. Thank you.
Rest
Right, that was Barbara Hannigan in concert performing the role of Lulu. That's the sort of high point of the opera, and quite an illuminating talk about her interpretation of the role and her involvement with absorbing the character and the idea and the feeling behind the character. It's I found that particularly compelling, and it's interesting to sort of contemplate that level of involvement, investment in any of the arts. It's something that, it's sort of beyond the normal human condition, really, but fascinating, I think. And she's a remarkable singer. There's a lot of her material, and she's sort of still in high demand and has a strong presence, has her own YouTube channel as well, but she sings incredibly well, and as you can gather, really involved, profoundly involved. All right then, well, look, it's getting to sort of wind-up time, I think. So, look, we'll have a sample of Mr. Beethoven with the Bush Quartet, and we'll follow on with sort of more examples next week. This is something from the this recent purchase, the Bush Quartet in concert in 1951, the year the group disbanded due to the passing of its leader. But I think they're one of the most committed and interesting sounds for a string quartet, and amazing how they think as one. You know, it's heard an opera singer can be so involved. In this instance, these four musicians, the string quartet, had 40 years of working together, playing the same repertoire, and they probably develop a sense of profoundly thinking alike, I suppose. But I think that that's well reflected in this recording. So we'll listen to a bit now. We'll probably hear more in the future. It's something I like coming back to. Thanks for listening through, folks. And it's been a interesting session, I suppose, checking out different things. And I hope Frank's okay. I'll listen back for a couple of minutes in case he's there or if anyone else is there. And then we'll follow on next week, I suppose. Yeah, I'm sort of, as I said, it's like a horseshoe magnet. I'm sort of bound to this experience. This is my very low profile way of expressing my form of madness. Right, let's have a listen. VK3SL saying cheers for now.